Hi, this is Paul. I am in a beautiful Airbnb in the Black Hills of South Dakota, which is sort of the main stop in my vacation this year. And it's an absolutely gorgeous place. I'm going to talk about the video. I'm just going to talk about how beautiful everything is here, because it is beautiful. I'm trying to get this to do what I can. So it's by a stream, just really wonderful. Got most of the family. You get my age, and the object of vacation is to try and lure as many of my adult children as possible onto it, which sort of increases the price of it all. But that's what's worth it. That's what's worth it. Why make a video this morning? Well, I got up early. I tend to go to bed earlier than much of the family. They're up doing stuff. Then I'll go to bed and get up early, which is what I usually do. And I'm working on the Fellowship of the Spirit conference, and my work will be sort of focused in the Book of Philippians. And some of you will know what that means, and some of you won't. The Book of Philippians is a book in the Bible, and it's one of the most quotable books of the Bible. It's, I think, probably the most quotable book of Paul of Tarsus. I just dropped a tweet on Twitter about that. The Wi-Fi here at this place is pretty bad. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this video up while I'm here, or I'll have to wait even for mediocre hotel video for me to upload it. We'll see. But it was funny because I made that video about the Jordan Peterson Snow White video, and then the day I posted it, the video came out with Hansel and Gretel, and I don't even really know why I'm making a video about Jordan Peterson's work right now, but maybe it's just because I was so bothered by both videos. Why am I so bothered by both videos? I mean, I'm one who unapologetically makes crappy videos. So I think YouTube is for crappy videos. It's always been that way. YouTube is for whatever you want to put out there and let the public decide and what they'll watch it. And maybe the public will decide that Jordan's fairy tale videos are good, and I'm all wet, and that's okay with me. I was studying the Book of Philippians this morning, and I read through the book and was starting to do some deeper work on the book, and then I dropped that quote over on Twitter, and then saw my message from Strawn, who Strawn is from South Africa. He and I have been chatting for really right from the beginning, and he made the observation, which I thought was really helpful for me, that the Daily Wire contract likely demands certain numbers of videos out of Jordan. And Jordan's probably got to put 2-3 videos out a week. And so he's been doing all these conversations with people. And some of them have been good and some of them haven't. And then probably he's got a demand, or at least there's some relationship with pay for him between how well his YouTube videos go. And now this is pure speculation. I might be totally wrong, and I might even get a note from the Daily Wire people saying you're all wet. And that's fine. I don't mind putting out crappy videos and having people tell me I'm all wet. I had a beautiful storm last night here. In California, I sort of missed thunder and lightning storms, but this absolute downpour at this Airbnb here in the Black Hills, and everything just this morning is just fresh and wet, and the temperature is perfect, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But why was I talking about rain? Oh, being all wet. I left my shoes out overnight, and so they're all wet, but I'll be all right. And so I just thought of the thing that occurs to me is, again, something that I've said many times in my videos, that in some ways Jordan is just out of place. It's one thing we don't pay enough attention to with human beings, is that place is really important for us. That's part of this whole cog-sci revolution that's going on, that the conference. If you haven't bought your tickets yet, buy your tickets. I don't make any more money or any less money depending on whether you buy your tickets. They've already contracted with me about what they will pay me for the conference, and they've already bought my plane ticket, and they've already paid my hotel room. And so I'm happy as a clam just to see everybody in the Fellowship of the Spirit, midwestjewelry.org. Link will be below. But place is a really important thing, and so much of the Jordan Peterson story, the Jordan Peterson phenomena, has been about place. He came to prominence in many ways because of time and place. And I've said many, many times that the moment and the man found each other in 2016, and that created something which was really quite phenomenal. And it's part of the reason for the fact that many people on YouTube are now deeply saddened and frustrated and embarrassed by, some of the turns that his career has taken in the last couple of years. Because at the same time, they're deeply grateful and they love him for what he did in 2016 to 2019. And I think that's all true and valid. And I've said many times that part of the great tragedy of Jordan's story will be that these two careers that he clearly loved and he was clearly deeply fruitful with, his careers as a clinician and his career as a university professor, were basically taken from him. And I'm struck, one of the things that I think years from now people will note if they pay close enough attention, is that we have all of these former academics now who are basically YouTube content creators, and with differing levels of success. It's often the case for university professors that they live in deep frustration because they're frustrated by looking at politicians. What was I reading recently where someone was remarking about this? I don't remember. It'll bubble up 5 minutes after I finish the video. But someone was making the observation. Oh, it's bubbling up now, and I've got to hold it back so I can keep talking. Someone is making the observation that university professors are usually deeply frustrated. They're frustrated at politicians. They're frustrated at preachers. They're frustrated at practitioners of almost everything. Practitioners who actually have to do things like lead churches and lead nations and lead states and lead cities, because, of course, the academics are always working in theory and saying, you're doing it wrong. But then very, very few academics, when they transition over into the practical, actually succeed because, again, all the revolution that's happening in knowing through cognitive sci says that, well, you can have all the theory you want, but the world is so endlessly complex that to actually do anything in the world is where things matter. And for that reason, Peterson's career as a clinician, and I'm told by one of his former patients, who's also a YouTuber, not really a YouTuber, he's sort of like me, sort of a community organizer, but he had both, he had Vervaeke as a student and Peterson as a clinician, as a therapist. He said Peterson was just an outstanding therapist, which I believe. Even Scott Alexander, in his review of 12 Rules for Life, just reviewing that book, said, the guy's clearly an outstanding therapist. And because of everything that happened to him, he can no longer be a therapist. And he can, to throw on top the what happened with the College of Psychology in Ontario, and he can no longer be a university professor. In his case, unlike the case of, let's say, the Weinsteins and Peter Boghossian, they basically are unhireable, and everything that they've done on YouTube has made them even more unhireable. Perhaps, and there's Peterson Academy where Peterson's trying to undo that, but at least from what I can see at this point, Peterson Academy is mostly just about creating video content, and that is a very different thing from being a university professor. Not that university professors can't create video content. Many of them are quite a bit more successful than I am. I'm not a video content creator. I'm a pastor. And I keep telling people that, even though I make videos. And Daily Wire isn't paying me to make videos, but if Daily Wire were paying me to make videos, they obviously wouldn't have a complaint about the amount of content I produce. They would probably have a complaint about the amount of followership I have and the amount of and the particular content I do produce, which is why Daily Wire has never approached me and asked me to make videos for them. And if they did, then I'd have a quandary, because it'd be like, oh, would that be easy money making videos for Daily Wire? Probably. Should I do it? Probably not. YouTube, again, is a place for people who have little to lose, and so making video content for YouTube is for shitty videos, and I make plenty of them, as many of my commenters will attest. And I'm sure this video will get, because it's about Jordan Peterson, it'll get some people who find me anew, and they'll watch about 2 minutes of me, and they'll say, why won't this guy get to the point? Why does he ramble so much and not talk about anything? And I will say, that's what all my videos do. And if you don't like it, there's plenty more on YouTube to watch. In fact, you probably clicked away within 30 seconds. Anyway, enough about that. The main problems with Jordan Peterson's videos about fairy tales, I've talked a lot about his main problems with his conversations with people. But the main problems with his videos about fairy tales is that when you're doing what he's trying to do with fairy tales is really in some ways similar to what preachers do with the Bible. And as I said in the previous video, it's he says it's psychological. The psychological meaning, well, sort of. And I haven't watched that recent interview where he says he's writing 3 books now, and part of me thinks, well, if they're anything like We Who Wrestle with God, that had so much anticipation and so much disappointment, I don't know, we'll see. 12 Rules for Life. Book did very, very well. Popular book. Maps of Meaning. Tortured book. We Who Wrestle with God. A failed attempt at editing, perhaps. That's the best way to categorize that book. And again, as with his videos, as with his books, it's not that there isn't good content in it. There's plenty of good content in them. And there's some bad content too. But they're just not good books. Because books are a thing. And sermons are a thing. And a lot of what Jordan's done have been analogous to sermons. And, even his Genesis series, which I think was really an excellent series, sort of analogous to sermons. They weren't necessarily good sermons, a little long for sermons. But I think Jordan's Genesis series had... Well, for a while I was helping to train lay preachers, and one of the things you learn with lay preachers is that, well, who wants to take a class? Who wants to try being a lay preacher? Well, it's usually a Christian who's got a lot of stuff that they want to say, and then usually the way I do it with lay preachers is you get them to write their first sermon. What they do with their first sermon is that they get a whole bunch of it out of them. And they spend hours and hours writing that first sermon, and it's usually not very good. And you just got to kind of get past it, because they've got it all in them, and they got to get it out. So they vomit it all out onto the poor, unsuspecting congregation. And congregations are pretty durable, as is the Bible. They take a lot of abuse. And then once they get that out, it's like, okay, well, now we can actually work on some sermons, because now that you've gotten that out of your system, we'll figure out what you can get in your system and what you can actually produce that might be helpful to someone. And so I think the Genesis series was what Jordan had been working on for years and years and years as a clinician, as a university professor. A lot of really fresh insights. Weren't necessarily always original, but again, time and place is super important. And they were, I thought, really helpful And again, they sort of were of the moment, and they were sort of they were the coming out of Jordan Peterson to the world, and it was well. It's interesting because I remember, I mean, Jordan's career, not unlike my own, is full of aspirational projects that never really come to fruition. Because if you remember, the aspirational projects that never really come to fruition, but also accidental projects that sometimes are super helpful, and other accidental projects that sort of fall on their face. Now again, that's not a bad thing. It just means you have to do a lot of sifting. And if you go back over careers of people, in fact, this morning I was trying to think of a quote and I couldn't find it, and it's probably me mashing up a Chesterton quote. And I pulled up a book that I have in my logos about 131 Christians that every Christian should know. I think Mark Galli, former editor of Christianity Today, who turned Roman Catholic, is one of the authors of that book. And it had some great quips about Chesterton, but the vast majority of stuff Chesterton wrote, people don't read, even though some of it is brilliant, but there's a lot of sifting you have to do with Chesterton. He's one of the great, most quotable people of the last 200 years, but you have to do a ton of sifting. And that's sort of true with Jordan too. And so, what we kind of have to do with Jordan is, Christian Baxter said Daily Wire should pay him not to make videos. Maybe Daily Wire should hire an editor. But again, that's sort of what YouTube is for. You just throw it all against the wall and let the audience sort it out. And that's kind of what Jordan does, because he very clearly has always watched the analytics of videos and publishing. He's a social scientist by training, after all. And so he looks at all the analytics and he tries to find out what is good. Now, unfortunately, with respect to the fairy tale videos, everyone's just sort of tired of sifting through his conversation, so that, what he said, if you look at the previous video to this, because I can't really do the interstitial things because I don't have the equipment for it, I can still do the rambling thing, which you're unfortunately subject to, and YouTube has to deal, of course, with all the shitty videos. The whole purpose of YouTube is to throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. I mean, that's sort of what Google does. So the only reason that Jordan keeps thinking, because there are approving comments in his videos, that the videos must be good. Now, I don't know if he hasn't figured out yet that just the way YouTube works, generally speaking, most of my shitty videos have 90% approval ratings because people hit the thumbs up so they can watch it later. Doesn't necessarily mean my videos are any good. It just means that, there's a strange small group of you that like my videos who will watch this one too. And you use the thumbs up button. Now, there'll be some thumbs down buttons because I put Jordan Peterson's name in the video. Some people will watch it, far less than what used to. So again, I think it's just the conversations have so been unwatched that a change in subject. Well, I remember Jordan early on talked about the fact that we look for information like we look for food, talk about brain circuitry and such. And I think that's true. And so Jordan Peterson has provided some great content, so we go back looking for them and we do the sifting ourselves. As I mentioned in the previous video, part of the problem with these fairy tale videos is that he doesn't seem to have much of a handle on fairy. Now, if you look at the video that Jonathan Pou and Seraphin Richard Rowland, I don't know what to call him now. He's got this new name. I understand some of the background. He's a deacon, and I'll probably keep calling him Richard or Seraphin. I don't know. There's so many Orthodox Seraphins running around that there's only one Richard Rowland. That's what I'm going to call him. Because if I talk about, there's like Seraphin Hamilton and there's Seraphin Rowland, and come on, you ortho bros. I'm not dissing the tradition or anything like that. It's just I still call Bethel McGrew Esther O'Reilly sometimes, and some of you will understand what that means. So this is a really shitty video. So YouTube is exactly the right place for it. But they're clicking on his fairy tale videos because of what he did with Pinocchio back in sort of the golden age of Peterson. That really landed for people. In a previous video, I made the comment that, part of what he did with that is he applied the video in a very timely way directly to men, and the man in the moment found themselves, and that was awesome. So they're like, well, if he did that with Pinocchio, it'll be great with respect to Snow White and Hansel and Gretel, and it's not. And again, it doesn't mean that there aren't any good ideas in those videos. It's just we have to do all this sifting, which, because human beings are basically lazy, and in a good way we're lazy because we conserve energy, hopefully for relevance realization, the kinds of things we should be paying attention to. We sift. But Jordan clearly doesn't have a handle on fairy. I mean, these are fairy tales. And so if you listen to Tolkien, which is not the easiest essay to listen to, his big on fairy stories, but you'll find plenty of good YouTube content out there that'll break that down for you too. But Roland really sort of nailed it in his conversation with Peugeot on fairy. And, when I'm in a place with a better video connection, a better wireless Wi-Fi uplink, maybe when I get back home. When I get back home, I'm going to be terribly busy prepping for Fellowship in the Spirit, and I've got all these people that got to talk to me, and I have a 2-week window, and it's going to be a mess. But then I'll be in Chicago for a week, and that'll be awesome. And I'll be back in Sacramento, and things will settle down. I'm almost ready to announce. I have to put the final touches on it, but I'd love to go to South Estuary and do that, but I might just because I really got to see my mom, I might just do another retreat at my sister's house in Connecticut this fall, and that'll be 12 people, and you'll have to pay my sister for the hosting, and you'll have to pay for lodging either at my sister's place or at a hotel. My sister's place is rough, it can be cheap, but you can freeze, but the food will be good. And the conversation will be great. Both the times I've done these little 12-person retreats, I've just loved them. They're better with the estuary protocol. Boy, this is a really shitty video. Maybe the title's going to be a shitty video about why Jordan Peterson is making such shitty videos now. But I haven't even really talked about that. So you've got fairy tales, and Jordan is right in that fairy tales, in the way they've sort of been crowdsourced and, let's say, Darwinianly edited and honed over the centuries, contain within them deep wisdom about life. But to access that deep wisdom, what basically a preacher does is, of course, the Bible has deep wisdom about life. And as Stott noted in his book, Between Two Worlds, on preaching, you have to connect that deep wisdom that's from an ancient setting, but has been shown to be practically multi-setting via the Darwinian editing that has happened to it. But when you have to apply it to here and now, that's really difficult, which is why there are so many preachers and so many bad preachers and so many bad sermons, including many bad sermons of my own. It's really hard because you've got relevance realization on both ends going. You've both got to, as the reader and as the exegete of the text, you've got to find what's relevant there. And then you've got to try to communicate and apply that relevance to your audience. And it's a nearly impossible task. And so in the context of Daily Wire and Jordan Peterson's mandate to make shitty videos, although I'm sure Daily Wire wants them to be excellent, it's just bad. And whereas he had years to sort of, plus he wasn't really working on Pinocchio from the text, he was working on Pinocchio from Disney. So Disney had already sort of brought Pinocchio up into the early 20th century, and then the gap was quite a bit less from the movie to the contemporary setting. To take it from the book requires a lot more. Now, I've got Nathan Jacobs' quotation about reading the Bible as an atheist ringing in the back of my head, which was the best quote from my last conversation with Nathan Jacobs. But part of what has happened with biblical studies is that by virtue of modern history, that's a big part of exegesis, and of course that is fraught. And sort of what the Orthodox are trying to do now with their own preaching, which they do fairly little of, but they seem adept at making YouTube videos and podcasts, is try to make it applicable. And so they're sort of, instead of taking the historicist's journey, they are taking the symbolic journey and applying that to now. And there's some wisdom in that, because a contemporary symbologist like Jonathan Pou has been spending years, Jonathan and his brother, because some of his brother's stuff has sort of been ringing in my ears, especially when I was in Chaco Canyon. Oh, we might get another storm. I'm glad I set up shop here in the gazebo. Part of what, the realization I had in Chaco Canyon, and I really hope I can get Ranger Purdy on the channel when I get back. He's so of the corner. He's so of the corner. But he might be so of the corner I can't land him. We'll see. But part of, what's going on in terms of the anthropology and archaeology of things like the context that created Chaco Canyon is connecting to this symbolism that Jonathan Pou had and his brother had to sort of work through in order to make sense of their own stories, in terms of the Quebecois going to charismatic evangelical, and now, at least in the case of Jonathan, going to orthodoxy. You've got to do all of that work in your own head, and praise be to God, Jonathan is quite a good communicator and a sincerely wonderful Christian man, and a tremendously winsome man, so that Jonathan is a very easy man to love. And he's an easy man to listen to, even though he can be difficult to understand and difficult to apply. Which is why Jonathan Pou, despite all of the wonderful things, deservedly so, that Jordan Peterson and John Vervaeke and other men like Martin Shaw have to say about Jonathan Pou, he's not terribly easy to understand, which Rationality Rules and Adam Friended and a whole bunch of other people have learned ever since. That in order to actually take in Jonathan Pou's work and apply it to your life takes real work on the part of the listener. And why, again, for Jonathan Pou, a lot of the accessibility that there is with respect to connecting with Jonathan's content was often done through, let's say, commentary on contemporary movies. Jonathan isn't doing that, and time will tell how well Jonathan's fairy tales land. I still have to buy the books. And it'll be interesting to see whether those in time deliver the payload that Jonathan hopes that they should. And the whole problem, of course, is, payload. And so Jordan Peterson from 2016 to 2019 delivered a walloping payload to the culture. But since then, not so much. And I'm sure Jordan is more frustrated than any listeners to his videos, because he, I'm sure, wants to experience the same walloping payload that he delivered in 2016 to 2019 and is frustrated. And despite the well-meant efforts of him and his daughter and those around him, again, this isn't to say that everything he puts out, you can still sift through Jordan's work and find gems. The guy's an incredible talent. He's got a lot of wisdom. He's very smart and he's very productive. But we're having to crowdsource him. And, again, maybe like G.K. Chesterton, 100 years from now, there'll be stuff and it'll be quoted, or maybe not. I mean, that's the way history is, this grand sifter that sifts everything. And I promise you that almost everything I'm doing now will certainly not be remembered, at least beyond many of your lifetimes. I'm fairly certain of that. I think after my birthday is tomorrow, and once you hit the age of 62, you think about such things, and you start assessing life, and you start assessing, which is why people, when they get to my age, they think about family. And for those of you who have not started a family, don't wait. Get at it. You'll do a shitty job, but that's okay. Everyone does a shitty job. Do the best job you can, please. Get as much wisdom as you can, please. Go to church and take your children to church, please. The church will mess them up in some ways, but this world messes us all up. And not going to church won't do them any better. Won't do them any. So it's tremendously difficult to jump from the text. This video could use some editing, and maybe I'll do it at some point. Maybe after all of my attempts at making shitty videos get fewer and fewer views, as they often do, I'll go back and edit them and maybe actually find something in all of this meandering that's worth something. But jumping from the text to the contemporary is difficult, and what Jordan's just doing is expressing a lot of his culture war frustrations and hot takes, and that's not going to last. That's why it's tremendously difficult to write a fairy tale, and why only time will tell if Jonathan Pou has succeeded in some of what he's been doing. I hope Jonathan brings some of his books and sells them at the Chicago conference. Maybe I'll buy them then. Because unlike when I travel for Europe and can't carry books, it's just one short hop from Chicago to Sacramento, and I can bring a bigger suitcase. But, adding my luggage and travel things reminds me again of the letters of the Apostle Paul, and perhaps the letter of the Book of Philippians, which prompted this video, where the Book of Philippians is not a book full of deep theological insight, let's say, like the Book of Romans. It's not a book of crushing pastoral application like the Book of 1 Corinthians. It's a book written to his friends from prison. It's a book written about suffering because Paul of Tarsus was suffering at that moment. But it's such a quotable book. There's all these quotations in the Book of Philippians. I did a sermon on the Book of Philippians, or a few sermons on the Book of Philippians, where I was going through some New Testament epistles a couple of summers ago, where there are more plaques generated by the Book of Philippians than by any other book of the Bible, even though the book itself is so short. And so in that sense, the reader has to do a lot of sifting, but there's the signal-to-noise ratio in the Book of Philippians, even for a casual browser, or the way that most people read the Bible today, which is sort of seekers for moments of inspiration. That's how Americans read the Bible for the most part. Seekers of moments of inspiration, which is how a lot of people watch videos, and how a lot of us have watched Jordan Peterson videos. The signal-to-noise ratio in the Book of Philippians is about the best in the Bible. It's a very short book. Tons of inspirational moments and quips in it, to even shame G.K. Chesterton. And he wouldn't mind being shamed by the Bible. So while you might find some nuggets in Jordan Peterson trying to work from the text of the fairy tales, they haven't they're mostly hot takes like this video. And they haven't had sort of the deep ruminating and the kind of focused attention that his university lectures had to Pinocchio, the movie. Wisdom is something, it's analogous to, let's say, wine or whiskey that requires age. Wine is probably a good example. Why wine and wisdom are often sort of connected. Because as one member of the corner who made wine and now makes whiskey and all kinds of other things, great conversation with Seabax, was connecting saints with Grim Grizz cards of the day. That was awesome. But there's so much that goes into wine. It's the trees from the barrel, and it's the environment of the trees for the barrels of the wine or the whiskey that go into it. It's the chemistry in the hills that the trees grow out of that get into the wine or the whiskey that go into it. And that's all true of the content that we as human beings are making, which is why Jordan Peterson from 2016 to 2019 was so phenomenal, and why he packed that wallop, and why lightning doesn't often strike twice. And again, it doesn't mean that everything that Jordan is doing or thinking is not worthy of mining and refining, because again, he's a good source, but the content isn't what it was then because of all of the chemistry of the soil and chemistry of the trees. And again, I should probably go back over this and re-edit this and add some of those great Christian Baxter conversations with, what was his name? He's a great guy. He's a great storyteller, great story. I'm sure, I don't drink alcohol, but I'm sure he makes great stuff. And just the fact that he was, he figured out how on the with the catastrophe of 9/11, he was able to sell some property and then buy a vineyard, and he's just a genius. And what I love about it, like Jordan, like most geniuses I know, they're hapless, unsuccessful people. Now, Jordan's been successful, praise God. I don't begrudge him any of the money or success that he's had, but because Jordan's success has been a very fruitful success, and it's blessed many people. But Stephen, he's not been enormously successful, but if you listen to his conversation with Seabax, I can at least put the link below. Maybe I'll add some of them in here. I don't know what I'm going to do, because it's raining today, and on one hand we want to go out and see parks, and on one hand I don't want to leave this horrendously expensive Airbnb because I've paid money for it after all, or my wife has. Maybe I'll have time to sit in today and edit and make this into something that I'll release in a few days. I don't know. But again, it's a worthy shitty video for the shitty videos that Jordan is making right now. And Jordan can be a little thin-skinned, so if he watches this, he might not forgive me, but you can't live in this world and do anything of consequence and be unforgivable by some people. There's another little chunk of wisdom for you. The Apostle Paul says, as much as possible, try to, get along with everybody. But if there's anything clear about Paul of Tarsus's life, is that he was not an easy man to get along with. Oh, life is so full of all these little ironies. But again, what it takes to make a good wine and what it takes to make a good whiskey is context and timing and content. And that's what makes the truly wonderful things of this world. And that's why this world is so amazing. Because if there's anything that it's full of, it's timing and content and context. And so much of it is mundane and common. That's just purely a law of statistics. But every now and then something shines through. And when that happens, you should just praise God, from whom all blessings flow, for the wonders and the grace and the glory that descends on us, like as in this place. You know, I think about the Black Hills. I traveled through miles and miles and miles of beautiful, beautiful rolling prairie and stuff. I just can just imagine how the grasslands were with the roaming herds of buffalo, and now it's all fenced off, and there are twice as many cattle in the state of Wyoming as there are in the people as there are in the state of Wyoming. And from California, you have to go east to find the West, which is one of those ironies. Like in Florida, you have to go north to go south. And if you live in America, you might be able to figure that out. But I love traveling through the deserts and the wilderness of the West, which is east of California. And I love the people, and I love the context, and I love the climate. And here in the midst of grassland, 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 you have this little eruption of hills, which is, of course, where Deadwood is, and maybe I'll drive through Deadwood. Of course, Grim Grizz has made a lot through about Deadwood. And I can know that, you know, because Grizz lives in the prairies of Oklahoma, and for which the Black Hills are this sort of oasis where we have some elevation, and we have some trees, and we have a beautiful brook behind me, a healthy stream. We had a magnificent thunderstorm last night in the middle of the night that I left my shoes out in. And it's just glorious in all of its particularity. And I have my children here, and my children are now young adults, and they're just beginning, you know, as young adults, they begin to get out of the shitty commons of the monoculture. And it is a shitty commons of the monoculture. And you realize that when you travel, where on one hand, you know, if you're going to stay in a Hampton Inn, you live in the shitty commons of the monoculture, but it's not a bad thing for a night. It's sort of like a hamburger at McDonald's, you know. There's not going to be any food poisoning, you know, except for that quarter pounder incident they had a couple years ago. It's not going to be any food poisoning. It's got marginal nutritional value. It's probably not good for you, but you can survive on it. And so Hampton Inns are sort of the McDonald's of the prairie. You know, the air conditioning is going to work. There's going to be a barely marginal breakfast in the morning, but you're going to save money by not having to buy a shitty breakfast at McDonald's. And I know Anselman's going to have problems with the fact I say shitty so often in this video. Shitty, shitty, shitty. But shitty isn't a naughty word in Canada, and in many places in the U.S. It's a farm word. There are much worse words I could say. But, you know, you can get a decent cup of coffee and you get some edible eggs. I don't eat those waffles anymore. This is just all sugar and flour. You get mostly sugar and flour at the breakfast at Hampton Inn. But then sometimes we stay in a different hotel, and, you know, we're staying in the Hotel Alex Johnson, which is in the Hilton thing, because we always accumulate the points and use points for the expensive hotels and so on and so forth. But my wife does all that. That's any nice place I ever stay is either because of gracious hosts who fly me someplace or my wife. Otherwise, I stay in a shitty hotel. But having stayed in a lot of shitty hotels, you know, the air conditioning doesn't work, and there's water on the floor from the bad plumbing in the bathroom, and the walls are paper thin, and you can hear everything on the street and all of that kind of crap. There are two false alarms, false fire drills in the Hotel Alex Johnson in Rapid City. It's a cool hotel, a really cool hotel in a lot of ways, and a nice hotel. The air conditioning worked, but El Rancho Motel in Gallup, rough around the edges. One of my favorite rough around the edges hotels is Perry Lodge in Utah. Yeah, it's a shitty video. I'm going to put that in the title just so we'll see if YouTube lets me. Just so you're warned. And so all of you are going to leave a comment like, will this guy ever get to the point of the video? The answer is no. So move on. If you want videos that people get to the point to, find, YouTubers, good content creators that edit and come to the point. They have this nice edited, detailed monologue, and it comes to a point and it's beautifully edited, and they use the I forget what it's called now. You Orthodox people know. But they use the iconography of Hollywood, and then they have their little video essay in the back, like Stories of Old, wonderful. And Thomas Flight, wonderful, wonderful videos. I love those kind of videos. They get to the point there, and I probably wouldn't watch myself. So Jordan trying to work from the text to the modern context, it just isn't good. They'll probably make more of them. And there's probably nuggets in them. So actually what I should probably go through is, like I did with some of his other stuff, is kind of go through and find the nuggets and pull them out. And so, as many of you say, you won't watch his videos, but just watch my video about him, which is fine. And it doesn't hurt his videos because my analytics are so small, it's not even a blip, which is why Daily Wire will never come to me and ask me to make shitty videos for them. But it's a difficult thing to do, to work from an ancient text to the modern context. There's the thesis of this video. And it's hard to do from the Bible. And it's hard to do from the fairy tales. And so if you want to learn about fairy, listen to Richard Rowland. Because there's something really important in the question about fairy, as in Tolkien and his Fairy on Fairy Stories lecture. And that part of what fairy does is deliver for us I don't want to use the word enchantment, deliver for us the reality of life, which is that it is haphazard, and that it is uneven, and that the world is full of common banalities. I am looking out at a forest full of mostly the same trees, but I'm sitting in a strange oasis of the Black Hills, which is a blessed, glorious departure from what surrounds it, which has its own blessed banality and commonness, as does the Black Hills on a particular scale. And so then to take these, basically what fairy stories do is they get us in touch with the reality of life in this world. Now, what I really appreciated, if I do any editing with this video, I'll have to drop that moment in Richard Rowland's conversation with Jonathan Pou. The safe thing about Jonathan Pou is that he'll likely never be an Orthodox deacon, and so we'll keep calling him Jonathan forever, and he won't take a name like Seraphim. Because when I hear Seraphim, I think about seraphim and cherubim. And maybe Jonathan will be cherubim. Cherubim Peugeot, how about that? So we'll have seraphim and cherubim making wonderful videos together about universal history. You see why I don't have many friends? That's not true. I have a lot of friends. I should be nicer to my friends. That is true. It's something my wife says, you should be nicer to your friends. I probably should be, because they've been very kind and nice to me. I love Jonathan and Richard. But I love a lot of people. I love people who are even shitty to me. People see the way some people treat me, and they think you're still friends with them. Yeah, I am. Boy, this is a really shitty video. Shouldn't have such long pauses in videos like this either. But there it is, and I'm not going to edit it out. What people want from Jordan Peterson is for lightning to strike again, and it won't. For the same reasons as winemaking is an art and a science, and whiskey making is an art and a science. And that moment when Jordan Peterson said something and the lights went on, praise God for that moment, because it was a gift from God to you. And it was a good gift. And you should be happy for it, and you should cherish it as you do. And you should continue to love him and honor him as you do. Because he was the vehicle through which God used to communicate his grace to you. And so praise God for that. But Jordan Peterson or Paul Vanderklay or Jonathan Pou or the Apostle Paul, we are all only channels of God's grace to us through someone else. And God will use anything He wants to communicate His grace to you. Through Balaam, He used a talking donkey. Through Elijah, it wasn't the windstorm, great windstorm last night. It wasn't the windstorm, it was the still small voice of conscience. Yes, but Jordan's framing of that, a little cringy. And right now it's this amazing, I don't know if you can hear the brook babble behind me. It's glorious. The trees are beautiful. The fresh morning, the rain having fallen last night, something I miss in California. We only get water in the winter in Sacramento, not in the summer, so a good summer rain, although it sort of scrambles one's vacation plans, is a glorious, wonderful gift from God. So, Jordan is making shitty videos, but I don't begrudge him that. And you should definitely read fairy tales, but read the fairy tales. And find people who are helpful to apply the fairy tales to you. Disney's helpful, and Jordan on Disney was very helpful. But again, he only had 100 years to span, not several centuries. It's a lot harder. Is this the end of this shitty video? It might be. Or I might add things to it. I don't know. I could upload the video on my phone. And if I go out someplace and have good 5G, upload it that way. See, even just the particularities of how the strangeness and difficulties of uploading this phone. Difficulties are constraints, and it's constraints that create beauty. Again, Karen Wong, The Meaning Code, one of her seminal observations in the corner. Part of why I love the corner is that we've got a whole bunch of mediocre people here who, because of their particularities, have unique and sometimes specialized geniuses of their own. And Grim Grizz is perhaps the best example. The guy's a genius, but he's a very particular genius. He's sort of like Tom Bombadil of a forgotten Oklahoma Air Force town. And, Nate Heil. Nate's got some genius. What he did at Northwestuary, that was genius. He managed the people and the food and the setting and the timing. I had no idea what to expect from that conference, and it was just beautiful. But again, it was all the particularities. And for me, again, Mark Van Heitzma is the pastor of that church. It was a CRC church. I got to spend time with my old friend Mark. And all of our lives are full of shitty little moments of particularity. And if you can work the relevance realization, and if you can see it, and if you can accept the tragedy along with the glory and the comforts and the gifts, wisdom can come out of it. Again, one of the videos that I'm probably most proud of, I can't even remember the title of it right now. How proud can I be? It was basically about how I find so much wisdom so often in such banal Christians, unsophisticated Christians. If you search Paul Vanderklay unsophisticated, you'll probably be able to find it. YouTube, for being owned by a search company, the YouTube search qualities are not that great. But even sometimes finding my own videos, because I make so many shitty videos. Ooh, getting a little breeze. Are we going to have another storm? I hope so. Is it going to spoil our plans? Probably, but I've got most of my family within a beautiful building, sort of trapped. Boy, that's like a dream come true where we all just enjoy each other. Can you hear the wind? Is the mic picking up on it? A shitty video with some shitty wind distortion on it. And now I'm getting some blowing of the moisture onto the you see that stream behind me? It's all the particularities. It's all the goodness. It's all the grace. It's all the wonder. Maybe if I stand over here. I've got the face lock on, so it keeps me in the picture, which probably was a bad idea because you don't really need to see my face. There. God is good. And he's given us Jordan Peterson. Oh, people are starting to wake up. I see him over there. He's given us Jordan Peterson and the Jordan Peterson moment and phenomena through which God brought grace to thousands, if not millions of people. And he led us to Jonathan Pou. And he led us to read the Orthodox Church or a Catholic church or a Reformed church or a Pentecostal church or some shitty little church on some corner somewhere that the sermons are difficult to listen to. The music is terrible. The people are annoying. But all of that gave you a place to love others and to be loved. You had shitty parents. You grew up in a shitty town. Your teachers in school were shitty. Oh, Anselman's going to have a real problem with it. Don't watch this video, Anselman. Should have said that at the beginning. Maybe I'll put it in the notes. If you're offended by the word shitty, the video will be offensive to you. I understand. But now with this little storm that's coming up, I'm about to go in and make some breakfast and enjoy. I won't call my family that, even though there's actually nothing like that about my family. They're beautiful. They're wonderful. They're astounding people. So, I guess that's the end of this video. I don't know what will become of it. Maybe it'll never see the light of day. Now, I post, there's no video too shitty that I won't post, at least for YouTube. So, and I don't think there'll probably be more shitty videos about these fairy tale videos because I don't really feel, I probably will have to sit down and write something out for me to get them out there, because I just find the videos a little embarrassing. I find many of my own videos embarrassing, don't get me wrong. But I find them embarrassing, and of course, Jordan, nobody put a gun to Jordan's head to make him sign with Daily Wire. Maybe it isn't Daily Wire's fault. What do I know? Again, don't take anything that I'm saying here as fact. If there's wisdom in it that you can glean from it, that God can work in your life, take that. So what do I want to say? I guess what I have to say is that it's well with my soul. That this world is just like this, and that's in some ways the point of fairy stories, because the whole Jordan Peterson phenomena was in some ways a fairy story. And he didn't run into a dwarf or a witch or a king or a talking fox. But the whole story of Jordan Peterson is a fairy tale. But it's very much a story of fairy, as Tolkien and Seraphim Roland talks about. Now I'm going to use it all the time because I'm strange like that. That something weird happened to Jordan, and it's both wonderful and dangerous. It's both terrific and terrifying. He both had his dreams come true and has suffered horribly. It's just typical of a fairy story. The wind is picking up. I hope it's blowing in the mic. I know it'll make the video shittier still, but it's the chemical of the soil that makes the oak what it is to make the whiskey what it needs to be, and its particularity. And so I guess one of the things I thought of is that, if he keeps making these videos, he'll become a cautionary tale. And there are elements of his story that's a cautionary tale. The amazing thing about fairy is that when it finds you, when you find yourself in a fairy story, and we all have, to one degree or another, a fairy story that is around us, and which is why those stories are true. There are things that happen in your life, some of which are your fault and some of which are not, which again, the fairy tales really beautifully encapsulate. Things that happen, things that change your story, for better or for worse. And some of the things that change our story are grindingly common. And some of the things are fairyishly particular. And that's what life is like in this world, which is why fairy stories are so important. And fairies are real. T-Grog. Oh, they're very real. And they might not manifest in a talking fox or in a witch that tries to eat children. It's amazing how much cannibalism is in fairy tales, and rightly so. This video might get canceled by the storm. But in some ways, Jordan's life has been more a fairy tale than the stories that he's telling. The akathisia that he suffered, the drug withdrawal, the miracle, the cancer that struck his wife and the miracle she received in healing, the strange illness of his daughter and the strange story that she's a part of. It's all has the whiff of fairy. But you can't, and that's why Martin Shaw is such a delight, because Martin Shaw knows that, because he's lived out in the woods. He's seen the elephant. He knows the whiff of fairy. And the thing about Martin is, when you listen to him, he knows the nature of fairy, as does Seraphim Roland, former. His life story is so incredible. And that's just it. That's just it. So the shittiness of Jordan's fairy videos, now he might make a good one. And that's just it. And that's the nature of fairy. And the beautiful thing about what's going on now is that when he makes a good one, probably someone will tell me about it and I'll listen to it. It doesn't mean that all of your recommendations to me are good. But some of you have really good batting averages. Is this gonna be a thunderstorm? Boy, I hope so. So anyway, maybe this is the end of the video. Somebody once bought me a t-shirt which said, "I'm preaching and I can't shut up." Applicable shirt. YouTube just indulges me. All right, this is the end of the shitty video. Do with it what you will.
A lot of barrels come from Arkansas, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
For mine, you're gonna laugh at this. For mine, I use locally grown trees to make my barrels, and that's difficult. You have to find someone to go out in the woods and chop the tree down and let it sit for 3 years to dry, and then take it to a mill. And like we're talking 1 or 2 trees, not. But there's a different flavor profile, right? The woods up here grow a different flavor profile than they do in the South. So again, if you want to be truthful in your bourbon, bourbon tastes more like a barrel than it does like the corn. In fact, it really doesn't taste like corn. We never brag about the corn. The label never says where the corn's from. On wine, you have to say some province, where is this thing from, or we're not going to take it seriously. But in bourbon, it's not corn, it's the tree. So when I go to a distillery and they say, oh, we're using local grain, I said, well, what about local trees to make the barrels? Then it'd really be. And it never happens because the barrels that I have made for me end up being about maybe $600 each, and I could buy ones from the South for $300 for half of it.
Oh yeah.
So, but again, you lose. You're going to lose some of the truthfulness. And plus, it takes you on a whole road because people want to say, well, how could the oak be different? Like, what would be different? Well, there's different levels of resins in the wood, in the North and in the South. Well, what does resin have to do with it? Well, the resins react with the alcohol and produce a variety of cinnamon and nutmeg flavors. Right?
Yeah.
If you talk to any whiskey aging expert, those lignin, that resin in the oak, it becomes everything because of that reaction with the alcohol over time. And the trees up here have easily double the lignin of the trees in Arkansas.
So these stories, people, the stories, right? This is the story of the gingerbread man, right? This is what you're dealing with.
I don't know that at all, Jonathan. Please explain that.
You don't know the story of the gingerbread man?
I do know the story of the gingerbread man. I just don't see how this one connects. So yeah,
it connects in the sense that you have these ambiguous beings that come across the water, and the question of whether or not they're going to make it into the next world is not a there are some things that don't fit, like they just won't. There's some things that can't be integrated, and that's just part of. I mean, if you take it at the outset at a fractal level, if you take it at a lower level, you realize that there's some things that just can't be integrated. So think about think about, let's say, America as a land where people come, and you think, so people come with their traditions, their behaviors, their own laws, their own kind of local things, and those things slowly get integrated. But some of them can't, right? And so if you come from a society that practices child marriage, that practice will not be integrated into America. It's not gonna come in. Like if you practice, female genital mutilation, like that practice will not be acceptable and will not be integratable into America. So you have these ambiguous things that come from the strange lands. They cross the waters, they come here. And then there's a big question. How much of this can be integrated and how much of it can't? And then it plays itself out. And some of the things are integrated and some of those things aren't. So this image of the alien beings that come across the waters and that basically ask, like, can I be... So okay, think about it this way. So someone comes to America and says, I want to be integrated. And then the guy says, okay, you want to be an American? It's like, yeah, I want to know if I can be an American. And they say, well, all right, say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right, yeah.
And then they're like, well, no, I can't say the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm not going to pledge allegiance to your flag and to God. Well, it's like, if you can't pledge allegiance, then you're not going to be part of America. Like, you just can't. There's no room for you in the identity because you actually don't want... There's something about you that is not able to participate. And so, it's just to help people understand the structure of these stories. Like, it's always easier when you apply them at lower levels than when you ask if areas can be saved. It's like, that's a harder one. It's a question that's so high that it's hard to...
It's not at all unrelated to the question of, like, when a non-Orthodox person visits my church, right? Before communion, we always make an announcement. The Holy Eucharist, being the very body and blood of Christ, is reserved only for those Orthodox Christians who have prepared themselves with prayer, fasting, and a recent confession, right? And so what we're saying is we're drawing kind of a boundary around the chalice and saying this is for people who confess the same faith that we confess, but also who have, properly prepared themselves. You're not supposed to just come up and just, willy-nilly take communion, even as an Orthodox Christian, if you haven't, fasted and prepared and things like this. And so this is one of the things that visitors sometimes struggle with, and it's always kind of odd to me in the sense that, I mean, like, I get it, but also, like, these are people who don't believe it's the body and blood of Christ very often. You know, these like, you know, Protestant visitors, they don't believe that it's the body and blood of Christ. They don't, you know, they don't believe our church is the true church, let alone a true church, right? You know, and so, but they feel kind of offended that they're being excluded. And I always, you know, kind of tell people, I'm like, listen, we'd be very happy to give you communion. There's just a couple of things we need to do first, right? You know, and it's sort of like, can you integrate? Can you, you know, accept the authority of the church? Can you put yourself under the authority of an Orthodox bishop? Can you say the creed the way that we say it and mean what we mean when we say it, and so on, right? That there's sort of just that question of, you know, there. Yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling a little bit, but
No.
It's related to that.
Trying to
same
give
kind of idea.
examples.
Yeah.
To why the question of whether the fairies can be saved is an ambiguous one. It's one that cannot be answered in a definite way. It can be only answered in a manner that seems to move back and forth, because that's what crossing the waters is, right?
Yep.
And so the what makes it through the waters, right? The Egyptians don't make it through the waters, folks. The Egyptians, they stay in the Red Sea, and the Israelites make it through the waters.
Right.
And that's what happens at that crossing. And so the question of the fairies crossing over the water, you know, it's like, that's the question that's being asked, like, what makes it through? And the thing is that, so now let's talk about the problem of what kind of makes it through. So the fairies that cross over the waters and ask if they can be integrated, or that's play music under the bridge, they are the image of the residues or of the remaining influences of old worlds that, although haven't been completely integrated, are still lingering. They're still
Right.
kind of hanging out. Like they still have influence on us. And sometimes you could say that some of these influences, the question of whether or not they can be fully integrated is still up in the air.
Yeah.
Because they feel like strange influences or unknown patterns that we participate in, that we don't completely understand the reason for, but are still kind of there despite ourselves, you know.
Midwestuary 2025, August 22nd through the 24th in Elmhurst, Illinois. A weekend you won't want to miss, with special guests Cale Zeldin, Paul Vanderklay, Rod Dreher, Elizabeth Oldfield, John Vervaeke, and Jonathan Pajot. Midwestuary 2025, the Fellowship of the Spirit. Stay tuned for more details. Visit us at midwestuary.com for ongoing updates.
Well, I don't know about the meaning crisis, left, right, black, white, or other vices, which Jesus Christ is right, or if we're all saved. From my perspective, our propositions participate procedurally, running in circles. Remember in body, we're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping, them damn egregores are whispering sweetly. We're all NPCs in the belly of the beast. Red pill, blue pill, bread pill, Mars Hill, or DMT, or whatever you feel. Got one and number two, it's all the same damn thing. So clean your room, repent on Zoom, ontology for dummies, a bird's eye view. 'Cause if you really knew, could you really even say? Totally depraved, all totally saved. A total disposition from the bed we all made. Or is it the elect? Or are we just insane? From John Vervaeke to Jonathan Pou and Jordan Peterson to the Chris Pacou Show. Paul Vanderclays and Griswold Grimm and all the dice he shakes. This estuary ditty is a little bit cringy, ain't quite the U-shaped or the hero's journey. All the NPCs in the flood treading water to watch you save the day with a bunch of chitter-chatter. From the ortho bros to the Catholic Joes or atheistic Joes to Protestant folks, the Joe Schmoes and Jewish Jacobs and everything in between. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, and with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own.